Hello, fellow educators. Thank you so much for joining us today at our launch of Mindful Equity's In Ed Together network. My name is Yolandi Harrowell, and I'm one of the co-founders of Mindful Equity. And my colleague who's with me, obviously, is Aretha Banton, and she's my fellow co-founder. And really, I want to spend just a few minutes telling you a little bit about who we are and why we created Mindful Equity. So let's start with who. Well, my name is Yolandi Harrowell, as I've said, and I'm an assistant head teacher at an inner London secondary school. Aretha is an associate vice principal in a London secondary school, all the way from EYFS up to post 16. And the question as to why we created Mindful Equity, well, on the screen now, you can see the very first tweet that set this program in motion. So in that tweet, I'd seen some data from the government about the number of Black African senior leaders in schools. And I was appalled, scared, worried, but also strangely comforted to know that actually the sense of loneliness that I felt in leadership was not just by my making, but actually it was something that could be explained by the data. There are not many women of color in leadership positions. And I went into work and I met Aretha, and being on the same leadership team meant that it was this unique unicorn moment where there were these two women working together who are Black in a secondary school on the leadership team. So why did we create Mindful Equity? We created it because we wanted that to change. It was an immediate call to action that something had to be done. So the reason we created Mindful Equity is because that call to action had to be answered. Next slide, please.
Sorry, I'm on now. You can hear me. Okay, so Mindful Equity has three strands to our service. The first is consultancy, which is about supporting educational settings to embed inclusion and diversity at all levels. It involves training, reviews of policies and processes, and a wide range of other services tailored to meet the needs of the setting. Then we have our research strand. Now, this is essentially a call to action for researchers. We want to contribute to building a strong UK evidence base around the importance of representation in education. We have lots of research from overseas, but finding UK-based research is not as easy as it should be. And that is because there is simply not enough available. If you are conducting research or you know someone who is, get in touch and let's move this thing forward. And then there is our In Ed Together network. And thank you again for joining us today. We have 4 levels of service as outlined on our all outlined on our website and on our services page. You're in level 1 now, which is our In Ed Together events. We have 6 of these events over the course of the year, 1 every half term, and all tickets are available via Eventbrite. Then we have our membership areas, hub support sessions which are hosted within our online community, and a closed chat network. These provide a safe and non-judgmental space to share ideas, get advice, and develop your own networks. Within that, we then have our 2 mentoring levels. The first is group mentoring, where in small groups, members can collaboratively share ideas and themes which are identified as from that group. So it's very personalized. And then we have a more intensive mentoring section. And this will allow members to work in pairs or on a one-to-one basis in order to move towards a personalized goal. You can find out more again by visiting the website and just clicking join us, and it will take you straight to the membership area. Next slide, thanks. When we started this journey, we had absolutely no clue about what this new project was going to look like. But we knew we wanted to do something powerful, something that would make a difference, something that was sustainable, and something that would leave a legacy. We knew our why. And that was our starting point. So we embarked on this journey. This is a collective journey. It requires collaboration and partnerships. This is definitely not a moment. It's not a phase. This is a movement. And we're not going anywhere until this job is done. And when it's done, we'll evolve and we'll take it to the next level. We're on a mission and we want you to join us. because we are much stronger together. And now for something a little bit more fun. So before we crack on with the really serious stuff, we've got a giveaway. So essentially we want to capture this event on one page. So we want you to create a mind map, a diagram, a flowchart, anything you like, which captures information from this event. It will be posted on our website and credited to the winner, of course. And the prize is on the screen now. It's a happy teacher planner created by Natalie Cole, founder of Educated Minds. Yolandi and I think these are just brilliant. They're so carefully crafted. So massive thanks to Natalie for donating and supporting. I know you're watching, so thumbs up to you. Please enter the competition via social media. Just tweet, Instagram, or Facebook, or email us directly. So going on to session 1, which is really about knowing your why. And I mentioned our why a little bit earlier when I talked about how we created Mindful Equity. It's really important. Teaching is not an easy profession. It's a challenging and demanding job. You'll have a direct impact on the lives of those little people in front of you. It's a rewarding job. It's an important job. And it's a brilliant job. You get to play a part in shaping a child's views, knowledge base, and personal development. You get to shape the next generation, shape our future leaders, shift the sands of social mobility. You get to motivate, you get to lead, you get to inspire others. You get to support others to reach their aspirations and then to make new ones. But that's my why. But what's yours? In order to know your why, you really need to take some time to define your values. What do you stand for as an educator, as a role model, as a person? What knowledge and skills do you want to share with young people and why? And crucially, how? We all have unconscious biases, and it's important that we are aware of them and the impact they may have on what or how or why you do your, have an impact on our what or our how or our why. Take some time out to define your own values. It's also important for you to think about your aims. Short term, medium term, and long term. What are you aiming for? Identify this goal and work backwards from that point. Plan your journey and look forwards to the next step. Your goal may be undefined right now. Perhaps you haven't even crossed the threshold into your new school yet. But don't forget to reflect on your own aims and objectives. Term 1 is going to be very busy, especially this term 1. Don't get lost in task management and task completion. Set time aside to think about the big picture. So, trainees and early career teachers, your takeaway task is to define your why, your values and your aims. Set out your pathway today. So as you know, we are here to promote representation in leadership. So leaders, your turn. Think about what leadership looks like in your setting. Does it look like this? Is the red chair missing? Where are you at now and how did you get there? Is this where you want to be? And is this really going to be your legacy? Why can't leadership look like this? All the time, everywhere. Diverse groups of people reflecting and creating education policies and practices and processes that are representative, diverse, and inclusive. What do we need to move towards this goal? And how are you going to do it? Next slide. Being an ally is not easy. You may be the lone voice in the room, creating that challenge. In some institutions, it can take a huge amount of energy, unwavering commitment, and quite frankly, just sheer guts. But the time is right, and the time is right now. There is a global context on which to pin these conversations, and there are more voices out there. When leading positive change, it is useful to refer to 6 keys to leading positive change by Rosabeth Moss-Kanter. Number 1, show up, be present, be highly visible. Number 2, speak up, question, challenge, and reframe that information. Number 3, look up, outline the bigger picture, and more importantly, outline the why. Number 4, team up, collaborate, and build a sense of partnership. Number 5, never give up, be resilient, persist until it's done, and be flexible in your approach, but inflexible in your persistence. And number 6 is the important one for me. It's about sharing success, sharing credit, and lifting others up as you move up. If you're truly going to lift others up, you have to create a career and development pathways that are transparent. How on earth can an early career teacher plan their career journey if they do not have a clear view of the steps involved? Pathways need to be transparent, provide clarity, and importantly, they need to be shared with others. Mentoring for trainees should involve conversations about the next role, their long-term aspirations. To start these conversations early, we must make the career pathway transparent and demystify that journey. When we are mentoring our early career teachers, absolutely discuss classroom practice, behaviour management, assessment, marking, and all of that other stuff. But let's also discuss long-term aspirations. Perhaps the NQT is not bold enough to initiate that conversation with you. Maybe that RQT is not confident enough to find you in the hallway and have that conversation, or into your office and just chat about what's next. Maybe the trainee hasn't even thought that far ahead. So be an ally and start that conversation. This is a starting point. This is how we can begin to create more diversity and representation in leadership all the time, everywhere. So leaders and allies, your takeaway task is this: know your why, and importantly, know your why now. What has changed in your own thinking? Have your values shifted? Knowing and sharing that journey is one of the most powerful things you can do. Thanks for listening. Over to you, Landy.
In our event, I'd like to introduce a colleague from an organisation called Educator. Can we have Irene in the studio, please? Hi, Irene. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem at all.
Yeah, so I'm here to represent Educator. Unfortunately, Educator CEO Natalie Richards, she would have loved to have been here with us, but she's judging she's on a judging panel for grant applications for COVID, so kind of really important. That's the only reason she's here. Otherwise, she'd have loved to be here. She'd have loved to be here with us. So just want to talk about our Teachmate. So in the aftermath of the George Floyd killings, which have sparked protests around the world, more people than ever have been moved to end the terrible legacy of racism in order to create a better future for our children. And so this year, for our 6th Teachmeet, we're bringing together schools to explore ways to end systemic racism and champion equality and acceptance. We're yet to confirm the speaker lineup, but we're planning a range of impressive speakers, both from within schools and also the broader community as well. And presentations are going to include Black Lives Matter, so how to discuss racism with students, effective ways of introducing Black history and the legacy of empire into teaching, tackling unconscious bias in behaviour management, and Black teacher recruitment. So this year, obviously because of the pandemic, our Teachmate will be held virtually. Also, it will be free to attend. And with a virtual raffle and a quiz for attendees, we really hope you'll join us and spread the word to your colleagues. And the link on the slide takes you to Eventbrite, where you can book tickets.
Thank you so much, Irene. You'll hear a lot more educators about Teach Meets. If you're not too sure what they are, they're a phenomenal way of receiving CPD outside of your school context. So thank you so much, Irene, and thank you to Educator for sharing that. And actually, Mindful Equity will be presenting at the event as well. We're very excited to be there. So thank you for having us.
Great.
So at this time, thank you. So at this time, I'd like to hand over to our keynote, which is Hannah Wilson.
Hi everyone, I am Hannah Wilson, former head teacher, co-founder of Women Ed and Diverse Ed, and I tweet and blog as Ethical Leader. And I just want to firstly say congratulations to Yolandi and Raya for achieving a brilliant kickoff to Mindful Equity UK. I'm so impressed with what you've already done in the first few months, and I'm very excited about what the future holds for this community. So thinking about being resilient and how we can nurture our resilience, I think these 6 domains of resilience are really key for us to use as a point of reference. So if we start with vision, being really clear on how we start with our why, understanding who we are, what we do, why we do it, who we are at our best, and thinking about the kind of the values that motivate us and drive us. I think that self-awareness piece is absolutely key to our resilience. If we move across to composure, we then need to be really clear and understand what triggers us and how to self-manage, self-regulate our emotions when we are triggered. Knowing the kind of the things that just get under our skin and how we react is part of us developing our resilience, because there will be bias applied to us, but also bias that we apply to situations and scenarios. And staying calm and in control means that we hold on to the power, as opposed to getting angry and upset or crying and giving that power away. So exercising that swan-like composure is really key to our resilience. Being able to reason is also equally important. Problem solving is part of the job when we're teachers and educators. Being resourceful, finding solutions, finding ways around situations so we can get to kind of the destination is really, really key. Being able to anticipate what's going to happen and how it's going to happen. So I think the more clued up we are, the savvier we are, the more sort of like collective wisdom we garner, the more resilient we come to being able to reason in those situations. And that is ultimately underpinned by our health and our self-care. Teachers are not great at looking after themselves. We are very good at serving everyone else within our community, within our organisation, and quite often we are the last person on our priority list. And making that commitment to yourself of self-care, where you create those healthy habits about what time you go to bed, how much sleep you have, how much you eat, you drink, you exercise, etc. Thinking about those rituals such as gratitude logs, sort of like journaling, daily affirmations, all of those individual small things collectively make you super strong and healthy, both physically and emotionally. So please, please, please look after yourselves and commit to that self-care, because that ultimately makes you emotionally resilient and physically strong, and that fuels your tenacity. And we need to be tenacious, ladies, okay? We need to be tenacious as women in education. We need to be tenacious as mothers in education. And for my peers who are women of colour, then that tenacity is even more important, because you are going to have to overcome and navigate double the number of obstacles and barriers that your white colleagues are going to have to experience. And I think that tenacity, that sort of like that pragmatism, that ability to bounce back is part of the resilience that we really need to nurture. We are going to be given no's. We are going to be pushed back. We're not always going to get the resolution we want. And being able to sort of like navigate that and have that elasticity to get around it is really, really key. And I think one of the key fuels, and that's why this community is so important, is about collaboration and those human resources around you. You might be the only woman of colour on your SLT in your school, and finding your tribe, finding those allies, finding those mentors, those coaches, those people around you, diversifying that network and having those people who have been there and done it, who you can talk through these situations with, will also make you super resilient and help you navigate those kind of those contextual situations. So just some things just to be aware of here then. That there will be barriers to break through. There's the glass ceiling for women, there's the concrete ceiling for women of colour. There will be questions and curiosity that your peers will look to you for answers and for knowledge. And part of your resilience is also putting them on the path to do that work themselves and not to rely on you. So I'm now going to share the mic with two wonderful women who I've recently met when I was asked to go and do some diversity, equity, inclusion work in a skit. Amara has just finished her ITT year and is joining us as an NQT in a profession come September, and Deepa is part of the ITT team of the Discovery Trust in the Midlands.
Hello, my name's Amara, and I just want to say a big thank you to Hannah for sharing the mic. I think that's a brilliant thing to do, and I was really surprised and excited when she contacted me. So I've just finished my initial teacher training year. I'm in Nottingham, I'm from Nottingham, and Hannah thought it would be nice for me to share some of my experiences and how I've remained sort of resilient. Initially, when I was younger and thinking about careers, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't really think of teaching because I'd never seen anyone who looked like me in those sort of visible professions. But the more I was around children, the more I realised how much I enjoyed working with children and how passionate I was about it. So I decided to become a primary school teacher. I knew the profession wasn't very diverse, and that was another reason for me wanting to do it. I really wanted children to see people who look like them reflected in jobs like that. But I was still slightly shocked when I first met the rest of my cohort, my first training days, how little diversity there was. And I did feel a little bit othered by my fellow trainees, and I don't think that was conscious on their part. But I did what's always worked for me before, and I really recommend this if you feel the same, and that is just to mingle as much as possible. So whenever we had training days, we were quite often put into groups to complete tasks, and every training day I tried to sit with a different group and tried to mix it up a bit, and that way they got to know me and I got to know them, and I felt a lot more comfortable. Another thing that really helped me feel comfortable and secure in the course is to build relationships with people like your tutors and your mentors. And that way, when you've got concerns, you feel more comfortable voicing them. And I did find it difficult at first to voice concerns, but after building those relationships, it was something that I was able to do. For example, in my course, we had no diversity training, and then when the Black Lives Matter movement kicked off, it actually made me really concerned that we didn't have any diversity training. I already knew the profession wasn't very diverse, and I just thought there's a lot more we could be doing. And as trainee teachers need to know how to talk about these things in the classroom and in our new schools. So I asked my tutor, and that's where Hannah came in, and she delivered us some wonderful diversity training, and I feel super confident now that as a teacher I know what I'm doing. And it was quite nice to be reassured that the things I was already doing were really good and really helpful. And finally, sort of towards the end of my trainee year, I started applying for jobs, and I'm still looking for my NQT position, but I was very apprehensive about being judged on job applications due to my name, or maybe on interviews due to my appearance, especially wearing a hijab, and I am still quite insecure about that, but that is me and that's my identity. And some really great advice that actually Deepa, who's speaking, gave to me was be true to myself, and the right school will come along for me. So in my personal statement, I've talked about my experiences and how, as an Asian woman, as a hijabi woman, and how that's an asset for a school. And so I'm really looking forward to securing my first NQT position and having my own classroom. And I just want to say a big thank you again to Hannah.
Hi, my name's Deepa Vasudevan. I've spent much of my career teaching. I did my teacher training over in Bradford, specifically actually to work with children from a BAME background, and so worked in a number of schools there. I then went on to have my first job over in Luton, again with children from BAME backgrounds. However, it was there that I realised that although the children were from very diverse backgrounds, the staff were not, and I became that go-to person that lots of staff would come and ask me about, in terms of if there were any specific cultural issues or issues around racism or religion that staff were not sure of, and that was really when I started to realise that I needed to become more resilient. I had to be prepared to challenge staff and to give some of that responsibility back to the staff that I was working with, and specifically senior leadership within the school as well, to make sure that they were able to handle things appropriately for the families involved. I went on to work for the local authority, where I worked with children for whom English was an additional language, and then went on to work in a role within equality and diversity and inclusion, and spent sort of 15 years working there. Again, through that, I had to challenge numbers of schools and number of head teachers for some of their views and attitudes towards certain families. Perhaps we worked with refugees and asylum seekers, and also with families for whom English was an additional language. So I'd worked in lots of places like that. I currently work for a trust in the East Midlands, which is an incredibly white trust. I actually am part of the initial teacher training programme. I work with some of the students there, and although I've spent a lot of my time trying to develop relationships with students and trying to sort of hold on to them so that they work for the trust, we found it really difficult to get BAME students to work in a trust, even though we're fully aware of the fact that our trust is predominantly white, and having that diversity across the staff structure is so important, and is something that I think we really need to value and support even more. I really would love to see or to work actually in schools that were more diverse. However, I've never had that opportunity. My hope is that in the future we can recruit and retain more staff from BAME backgrounds. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our keynote, and it was wonderful when she came up with the idea of sharing the mic with two incredible educators. It was wonderful to hear from Amara and Deepa. We know that you are listening as well, so thank you for being with us. And I think it's only right, after hearing a lot about how we should become more resilient educators, to talk about well-being. I think well-being comes along now with the word workload, and I hope to be sharing with you some of the problems, but also 5 key areas that we can focus on as trainees, as mentors, as future educators, to ensure that we take a proactive approach towards our well-being. So let's start at the beginning. Are the myths true? So when we talk about myths, or rather when I'm talking about myths, I'm talking about those teacher myths. Richard, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So are these myths true? Often when you ask a teacher, would you recommend becoming a teacher? This image in the middle comes to mind, that really tired educator who has carried shed loads of books home, but that's just focusing on that workload element. There's an emotional element which comes along with it. That being, am I doing the right thing by the students? Am I balancing my personal life with my work life adequately? Am I here for every child of colour who perhaps only sees me as that role model in the school because I happen to be one of the only Black women or people of colour that they see in the school period? The more burdens that you feel that you carry as an educator, the harder it becomes for you to last, remain in the profession, and also to be that resilient educator. And we end up screaming out for help. So it's important now to really think about what could we do to be proactive and not reactive, not think about, I think there's a place for having yoga sessions in a school if that works in your context. But if we provide tools for our educators, if we think about what could be coming ahead, if we demystify, as Aretha mentioned earlier, the pathway, the challenges, the upcoming problems, we can be more assured, more prepared for what is to face us. So just to lay the ground and the landscape of why some of these issues come to pass. Workload is commonly the most cited issue that educators have when it comes to teacher burnout. 33% of teachers leave the profession within 5 years. Those are the cold, hard facts. In a 2016 workload survey that was conducted by the government, they found that teachers with less than 6 years of experience reported that they worked extremely longer hours than their more experienced counterparts. The data supports what most educators feel. And if you're a trainee teacher watching this, you might feel worried and anxious about the year or years to come. But what we want to focus on is those solutions, those proactive things that you can do to equip yourself to stand the test of time in the profession that we all love. As mentors, I hope that you can take from the 5 areas I'm going to focus on, tools, themes to focus on with your trainees, but not just them, but also yourselves as mentors. So let's begin with the first theme. So the first thing I'd like to begin with is connection. At the beginning of this presentation, we launched to you what our In Ed Together network will look like. And for this very reason, for this very theme alone, that is exactly why it is a fundamental part of mindful equity and what we stand for. Human connection, even quoted and cited by Abraham Maslow, I'm a psychology teacher, so I'm always going to fall back to psychological theory. If you don't feel that you have that sense of belonging, that sense of connection, that sense of unity, that collegiality, you are less likely to be able to withstand pressures, stresses, and the workloads that come with everyday life, let alone the additional workload and the additional stresses that come with the job at hand. Within our network, we hope to ensure that we are bringing together educators. If you are in the deepest depths of Wales and you happen to be the only teacher of colour, finding your network within the huge community of teachers that exist across the United Kingdom, you are more likely to feel that your experience is shared and understood. If you're a mentor, how much time are you taking to connect with educators outside of your network to seek ideas of how best to support your trainees within your settings? Because we know the educational landscape is very different up and down the country, and I'll touch on that in just a few slides' time. It's really about, for mentors and trainees and our allies, to really find your tribe, expand that tribe, because once you've found that community, that collegiality, that sense of belonging is strengthened. And once you feel you belong, that is what the research shows allows us to flourish. And so I encourage all of you to leave this session with the desire and the clarity that you want to feel connected with those educators within your profession. I know that personally for me, it's what gave me the ability to withstand the years of struggle that I had throughout my career, by knowing that within my school, I have my network, and I'm so grateful that I have the privilege of working with Aretha for the past couple of years. Outside of that, it's my social media network, and the list goes on. But I'm really looking forward to building the In Ed Together network, because I know within that there'll be some powerful testimonies and stories of success that will be shared. So moving on from network and connection, the next phase I'd like to focus on is the education landscape. And as I've already mentioned, it differs up and down the United Kingdom greatly. That difference shows in the stats that the government has collected on the workforce data that they've collected on the government website, which shows in the United Kingdom, depending on where you are, will there'll be lots of difference in the demographics and the people that you'll see. For example, we know in London, it's hugely saturated with very diverse schools, teachers, students. But as we leave London, the face of the education landscape changes. Why is this important? Because as educators, one thing that often gnaws away at our ability to feel calm, to feel focused, to feel that we are successful and resilient within our profession is that we often think inwards. Inwards in the sense that we focus purely on our particular context in our school, and it's very easy to do. When it comes to the half-term holidays, the summer holidays, you might connect with a teacher or two who are colleagues, friends, people that may have moved on to other institutions. If you're a trainee, it's the same thing. You start to connect with the other trainees on your course who are in different schools, who might be doing different things. But as the years go on, as the terms go on, as your time in the career goes on, it becomes ever more present that teachers become a little bit more inward in the way that they are working. And the Arbinger Institute highlights this in these two different mindsets that we fall into. That tunnel vision, that silo working, which in actual fact, we often band about the phrase, don't reinvent the wheel. Well, we wouldn't reinvent the wheel if we were a little bit more outward facing, if we knew what others were doing. We source inspiration and ideas from people outside of our context. We are more likely to build up our toolkit of what we can do to improve our current context, and also realize that perhaps things aren't as bad as we thought they were. And even if they are really bad for you as a trainee or a mentor, know that by seeking out an understanding of what it looks like outside of your context, you have greater awareness. There'll be more opportunities for collaboration, and you're more likely to be successful. And already I can hear or feel that sense of there isn't time to do that in our working day. But again, lean on your network, lean on that connection and those connections that you've made. If there is ever a silver lining in lockdown, and we all know as educators, schools never closed, but there was a slow. There was a time when people had an opportunity to reflect and think and start to reach out to other people. And that is what we're encouraging, because that understanding and that knowledge and that awareness of the education landscape more widely will allow us to realize that education does need to be a little bit more cohesive, and we need to work less in silos. The fewer educators who are working in silos, the more of us that are able to feel a lot more resilient, a lot more collaborative and collegiate in our way of working. So I've spoken to you about connections and building your network, and also looking at the wider educational landscape. There are 3 more themes I'd like to work on. And the next one is being a work in progress, which we all know our students are wonderful works in progress throughout their time in education with us. But as educators, how often, apart from when you're training, do you see yourself as a work in progress? When you're a leader, do you see yourself as a work in progress? More often than not, the more years you get under your belt, you start to feel that you have to be the expert. You must know it all. But one thing I learned very quickly in my leadership journey, thankfully to the wonderful leaders that I had around me, my allies, people like Hannah Wilson, who I met at a Teach Me many, many years ago, is that actually we're always learning. And personally, I have a hidden disability or disadvantage. I'm dyslexic. And that dyslexia means that actually I shy away from reading. I know that. I see it in dyslexic students that I teach, and I know that within myself. But that's not an excuse for me not to educate myself on what could make me a better educator, someone who understands a little bit more about what is going on currently in my field. As a psychology teacher, I'm constantly reading the British Psychological Society's digest, because the more I learn, the more I understand. However, reading is challenging, it's time consuming. The amount of teacher 5 o'clock tweets that I see on Twitter talking about the books that they're reading, and that's phenomenal. But if you're out there and you're thinking, actually, I'm running out of time, and as a trainee, we've already said that there's going to be hours and hours spent on your planning and preparation because you are brand new to the field. You are learning your way, you are honing your craft. So what are some shortcuts to ensure that you can keep that work in progress going, that you can keep your development building throughout your training years, things like podcasts and Audibly have transformed my life. Fortunately for me, and some of you might be thinking, unfortunately, my journey to work is changing from 10 minutes to about 40. Now, straight away, some of us might be thinking, this is terrifying. However, I see it as an opportunity for me to have 40 minutes of time to learn, time to hone my craft, time to develop and get better at what I'm doing. And so what do? I listen to podcasts, I listen to Audibly, audiobooks. There are lots of literature that I have devoured during the summer break just from listening to them through an auditory fashion. And that helps me continue being that work in progress. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this is continue to be a work in progress. Even when you step into leadership, you are not an expert. No one really is. But what we can do is continue to hone our craft, continue to learn. And if you take that, it gives you, if you accept that you're a work in progress, you are less likely to beat yourself up and see yourself as someone who is failing, because you know that you are constantly developing your craft. And that's applicable from trainee all the way up to any chief exec of a multi-academy trust right now. So moving on to our next theme, confidence. And some of you might recognize that picture on the left-hand side. I remember when I was 16 years old and I was finishing at my secondary school, and I was so excited to be given that folder. And that folder, for those of you who don't know, is called your National Record of Achievement folder. And I believe a whole company probably went out of business because not many schools use it anymore. But the one great thing about that folder is it had in it, and still does to this day in my mum's house, all of the certificates that I achieved from year 7 up to year 11. Everything that I was proud of went into that folder, and it allowed me to record all of the wonderful things that I did throughout my time. So why am I bringing this up now as an adult, as a working assistant head teacher? Because there's one thing as women of colour, we're not very good at doing, and that is blowing our own trumpet. It is signposting our successes, because as anyone who watches Suits will know, it's not bragging if it's facts and it's true. And so why am I mentioning this? Throughout your educational career, every success that you make, note it down. You don't have to get a fancy notebook, but personally, I prefer a fancy notebook. I have a fancy moleskin because that makes me feel happy about it. And in that moleskin, every success I have, from a student who went from a U to a C grade, and then from that C to an A in year 13, every success that I've made, no matter how big or small, I note it down in that book. Because whenever you have that crisis of confidence, I just have to go back to that notebook. And I go back to that notebook and I look through and I see all of the things that I've achieved throughout my time in education. Because I tell you now, even as an assistant head, there are days where I just don't get it right. It just doesn't work. But there are many days where it's been phenomenal, and I've had some amazing successes that, even thinking about them now, make me smile and can bring you out of any lull or low that you're having throughout your time. So get yourself a notebook and note down, mentors, trainees, all of you, start signposting your successes for yourself, date them as well. So that actually, when you're writing that application for a job, it writes itself. It's just you collating together all the wonderful things that make you a phenomenal educator in your field. My last thing, and actually probably one of the most important, I feel, is taking time out to breathe. We cannot be the very best versions of ourselves if we are constantly reacting. Take yourself forward in time and think about those experienced educators. Think about how you feel when it gets to May and the exams are about to hit in and everything is just completely reactive. And the last thing I want to say to you is this: in your calendar, in your diary, make a note of exactly what or when you want to take time just to reflect. Think about the time you've had ahead of you, the times you have ahead of you, and rather the times that are coming, that you've just come through. Why? Because if you can take the time to reflect, you're more likely to be proactive. You can calm those stressful nerves. and act in a more coherent way. And so I've gone through 5 themes with you. Firstly, reach out for connections. Last slide, please. So reach out for connections, definitely take time out to breathe, signpost your successes, don't forget that you're a work in progress, and look outside of your school context, particularly in the middle of the year when it's feeling really hectic, and start to think about what the educational landscape looks across the United Kingdom. And so in that way, you'll be able to take care of your well-being and become a much more resilient educator. So thank you for listening to me. I would like to hand back over to Aretha.
Hi everyone. Yeah, just amazing talk today. Thank you, Landy. We've had 5 speakers today, including myself, and I hope that you found a lot of the information we've given you quite useful, quite practical, and really given you some time to think and reflect on actually what your journey might look like next year. So whilst Yolandi's been talking, I've been busily trying to create capture all the comments and capture a lot of the questions. We're going to go straight into our Q&A. We've got Hannah Wilson joining us, and Yolandi can come back now. I'll let you back in. You're welcome. Come off mute. Okay, so thank you for popping in. Amazing Jay as well. So our questions. Firstly, how would we like to see HE establishments help those start conversations prior to students going back into schools and graduating? So how can HE support our new cohort of trainee teachers? Yolandi.
So firstly, signpost them to Mindful Equity, obviously. But in the practical things that you as a HE institution can do, really think about demystifying some of the troubles that are ahead. Because the reality is there are problems that are going to be faced by trainees. And actually, let's not reinvent the wheel. There are so many experienced educators out there willing to come and have those conversations, to share those stories. And through those stories, your trainees can understand what is about to face them, the realities of the day-to-day tasks, and give them a reflective journal. I know that a lot of institutions are starting to do this, but actually get them to reflect on specific things. What were the challenges and how did you overcome them? If they aren't reflecting on how to overcome them, whether it be asking an experienced member of staff or documenting what they did to overcome it, how are they going to remember how to do that again?
Brilliant, thank you. And then question 2 for Hannah. When will we know that racism is no longer an issue in education and representation and leadership?
In all honesty, do we think that's going to happen in our lifetimes? I would like to think it would. I mean, when we haven't got consultants being paid to do diversity work, when we're not talking about we need more BAME visible role models on MAP boards, on governing bodies, on SLTs, I think we're looking at a cover 20-year cycle here. So maybe by the time I'm retired, we will see more change, but we've got a long journey to go here. And I think we need to be really, really committed to the longevity and the sustainability of that journey, and not think it's going to be sorted in a matter of a couple of years.
Brilliant, thank you. Yolandi, another question for you. Are there contextual factors that mean BAME educators might struggle more with self-care? And I'll come to you as well, Hannah, for that.
I think definitely just reflecting on my experiences, when you are in an educational context where you happen to be the only person of colour, that is when self-care becomes nearly impossible. Why? Because as teachers, we already know we typically are very selfless. We give our all to what we're doing. We dedicate so much extra time for no extra pay, but we do it because of the love of the job. Now imagine doing that, but also carrying the emotional burden of every child of colour in the school, because they see you as the person who understands them. They see you as the person that they can come to if there's a problem that their white teachers will not be able to understand. And so if you're carrying all of that, even if things are going wrong for you in that school and it is actually the right move for you professionally to move on, maybe seek another position or promotion, you are less likely to do it because you feel you're going to be disconnected from the students. Therefore, you're stagnant. And so I do think self-care is really difficult. I do think it's the allies and champions I've had in my career, and I say this to all mentors and allies out there listening today, speak to your trainees who are of colour and ask them if they're okay. Check in with them, but actually, are you really okay? What extra things are you carrying that I might not be aware of? And have that open dialogue so that they can feel more understood.
And Hannah, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, I think everything you said there, Yolandi. I think what I've seen, and I've worked in 6 schools, it's the social isolation that those individual BAME teachers and leaders experience. I line managed a black female assistant head teacher, and I could tell when her well-being and her self-care was slipping. But that's because I knew her, and I knew what to look out for. And I think it's that having those safe spaces to go to, and quite often those safe spaces for BAME teachers and leaders are actually outside of the school. So how can we make sure that we have safe spaces within the organisation?
Thank you, Hannah. So, Aretha, question for you. A question came in which says, as a white woman, how can I support women of colour when I don't have the same emotional labour?
Okay, that's a tricky one. I think it's about being bold and making those conversations happen in the first place. It's about not letting that hold you back, because actually, if those conversations, if that space isn't there, those conversations never take place. So if you are a white woman working in education, create the space for those conversations to happen first. You don't always have to initiate it. They don't always have to initiate it. You take turns in doing that. And actually, one of the great things about working in schools is that we're working with people, we're working with children. It doesn't have to be a conversation about that person and their experience. It can be a more general conversation. You can pick up themes as you go through. There is no 2 days the same in any school that I've worked in. There's always an issue that comes up. And there's always that reflection that has to happen afterwards. And sometimes that might be about SEND, it might be about behaviour, it might be about teaching and learning, it might be about parental engagement, it might be about the curriculum. So there are topics that naturally are there for you to engage in those conversations. It doesn't necessarily have to be about how do you feel as a black educator. That will come out in the course of the conversations if the space is created. So I think my advice is create the space. Just get the conversation started, and once you've done that, you know, the doors are open, people will talk to you because they know that you're approachable and willing to engage back. And most importantly, I think actually, is once you've had those conversations, reflect and then put something into action, because those conversations won't continue if action doesn't follow, because they will be empty conversations. Those conversations should serve a purpose, and the purpose should be to move forwards, so to speak.
Thank you so much for that. Hannah, would you like to chip in, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me it's listening and creating those spaces, as you say, but not making assumptions, and actually saying, what can I do to help? Because what the worst thing would be if for me to listen to one of you two offloading and then for me to go and try and fix it and to be speaking on your behalf. So I think it's that, like, what can we do together? What can I do to help you? How can I leverage my privilege in the spaces I'm in to actually support you?
Thank you so much. Okay, next question. How do you navigate anti-racist education and Black history when you are the only Black member of staff?
Okay, again, it's about being bold enough to have those conversations. You have a natural platform there within Black history, and it is about ensuring that people understand that Black history is not separate. It's history, it's world history. We're talking about people within a global context. And if you miss part of that, then you're not talking about history. There has to be a recognition, though, that history is written by the winners. So we only have those records and we teach from those records. And actually, history is about critical evaluation as you get further up the chain. It's not just about regurgitating facts. And so that's a natural platform to use when you're in that classroom to teach other students, actually, how do we reflect on this myriad of facts that I'm spewing to you every day? How do you take that information and put it into context and make it meaningful? And that's why I spoke about it's the way, it's the how. It's not always the what, it's the how you're going to do something. And I think when you are the only Black person in an education environment and you want to push for that, it does take guts, it does take energy, but it also takes perseverance. And I think you've got to find within that education setting your champion. Who are you comfortable talking to? And use that person as that kind of platform to move forward, because you cannot do it on your own. It's just not going to work. You do need to collaborate.
Thank you, Aretha. Hannah, would you like to add to that?
absolutely about finding your allies. It shouldn't be the one black teacher in the school fighting the good fight for Black History Month being not just in October. It's like, I think working with the head of history, the head of English, going to those subject leaders, escalating up to the curriculum leader. It should be a school-wide approach by the whole teaching team. And just like opening your eyes as you walk around your schools. The things that really bugs me are about like display boards where you don't have diverse representation in every corridor. It's only on the Black History board in the history corridor. So thinking about your whole school as an inclusive space.
Thank you. And I think just because we're running out of time, last question, and if each of us could perhaps give just a couple of 10 words. I'm going to limit us to 10 words to answer this question, okay? What does resilience in education mean to you? Aretha, you first.
Thanks. Yolandi also knows that I've got dyscalculia, so giving me 10 words means I'm there going, okay, 10. Thank you. Okay, it's going to go over. So resilience in education to me means grit, actually. I mean, for me, it means grit and determination. From my starting point to now, that's the one thing that has got me through, from being, you know, in a single parent family to being a single parent myself, to not having a teaching qualification, to getting that qualification whilst I'm at work. That is the one thing I hold on to, grit and my sense of values, my core values.
Thank you. Hannah?
Absolutely, knowing who you are, what you're doing and why you're doing it, and finding that supportive circle around you where you support them and they support you.
Thank you, Hannah. And for me, it's about finding your tribe, whether that be in your school context, outside your school context. It may be your family. Find your tribe. That was my within 10, not the rest of it. At this moment, I would like to give a massive thank you to Hannah, and thank you again for sharing the mic. It was such a wonderful idea, and I think more shows, organisations, events need to do this because it's a wonderful way of getting those voices out there. And Aretha and I will wrap up now. So we have a couple of things that we'd like to share with you. I say a couple, 3, because I do love 3. Aretha will tell you it's my favourite number. So 3 things we'd like you to do. Number 1, enter our competition. You've listened ardently, and if you missed the beginning, it's not the end of the world because you got something from us, so we thank you for that. And any notes, any mind maps that you've put together from this event, and we chose that because we're teachers, it's what we do. Take a picture of it, share it with us through Instagram, through Twitter, through Facebook, through email. If you don't use social media, fine. But in the subject line, in your post, please use the hashtag in Ed Together. We'll search that at the end, which closes today at midnight, and we'll announce our 2 winners of those wonderful diaries created by a wonderful friend of ours. 2, subscribe and follow. That is, subscribe and follow us on all of our social media platforms. That's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Go to our website and have a look there too. And finally, we're really excited for our 6 upcoming events. And our first event, at the end of this event, will go live on Eventbrite, and you'll get an email for a link to that shortly. So join the event, but don't just come alone next time. Come with a colleague, bring people along. It's important that allies, as well as women of colour, hear this message, because it's not a moment, it's most certainly a movement. Aretha, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just a massive thanks to everyone for joining today, and thank you to our guest speakers. They've been absolutely amazing, really positive comments on the chat, and just really I hope to see you next time. Bring a friend, join, subscribe, and don't be a stranger. That's me.
I'll try that again. I think that draws our event to a close. Thank you so much for taking part, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.